All right, let's get right into it. We're going to unpack the story of one of the U.S. government's biggest and most complicated creations, the Department of Homeland Security. And this isn't just about some government agency. It's really a story about how a single tragic day forced a complete teardown and rethinking of what national security even means.
To really get why DHS even exists, you have to start with this question right here. I mean, it seems simple enough, doesn't it? But before 2001, the answer to that question was anything but simple. In fact, it was a huge problem. And that phrase right there gets to the absolute heart of the matter. It wasn't that nobody was on the job. The problem was that everybody was on a different job. You had responsibilities scattered all over the place, information was stuck in these little silos, and there was no single person or agency whose job it was to connect all the dots. So let's take a closer look at what that fragmented defense actually looked like. Because before there was a DHS, the whole way the country thought about keeping itself safe was basically split right down the middle. This distinction is absolutely crucial to understanding the problem. On one side, you had Homeland defense. Think armies, fighter jets, threats from outside our borders. That was pretty clear-cut. That was the military's job, the Department of Defense. But then you had this other thing, Homeland Security, protecting us from threats inside the country, like terrorism or natural disasters. That was a whole different story. It was just this jumble of different civilian agencies, with no one person calling the shots for the whole team. And as it turns out, that scattered, uncoordinated system had a massive, fatal blind spot. A blind spot that a single Tuesday morning in September would expose in the most tragic way imaginable. The attacks of 9/11 revealed just how vulnerable that whole setup really was. I mean, just look at these numbers. They're stark, they're devastating, and they tell the story of a catastrophic failure. This was the wake-up call. The old way of doing things, with dozens of agencies all just staying in their own lanes, that was over. It just couldn't happen anymore. The reaction from Washington was honestly lightning fast. As you can see here, just a month after the attacks, an Office of Homeland Security was created to at least try and get everyone talking to each other. But it became obvious really fast that just a coordinating office wasn't going to cut it. A year later, Congress took the huge step of passing a law to create a brand new, full-on cabinet-level department. Which brings us to the solution, the massive effort to forge a new shield. And listen, this was so much more than just creating a new logo and moving into a new building. We are talking about fundamentally rewiring the U.S. government on a historic scale. Just to give you a sense of how big a deal this was the largest government shakeup since the start of the Cold War. You have to go all the way back to 1947, when the Department of Defense and the CIA were created, to find anything even close to this massive of an overhaul. At the heart of this whole organization was one really powerful number, 22. That's how many different federal agencies, or in some cases just parts of agencies, were literally pulled from their existing homes and merged, by law, into this one single new department. And we're talking about some heavy hitters here. You had the Coast Guard, pulled from the Department of Transportation, the Secret Service, moved over from the Treasury, and FEMA, which had been its own independent agency. I mean, can you just imagine the logistical nightmare, the cultural challenge of trying to merge all of these very different groups into one cohesive force? And this wasn't just about moving around some desks. On day one, in January 2003, the Department of Homeland Security opened its doors with a workforce of 180,000 people. Just like that, it became one of the biggest teams in the entire federal government, tasked with this massive new mission. Okay, so that's the origin story. That's how it all got started. But what about now? What does this department that was born from crisis actually do today? Well, this is the official mission statement. It's pretty broad, sure, but you can think of it as the guiding principle, the North Star for everything they do, from the people you see in the airport security line to the crews helping out after a hurricane. All right, let's break that down a bit more. That broad mission really boils down to 5 core jobs that define what DHS is all about. And man, it is an incredibly wide range of responsibilities. Preventing terrorism, securing our borders, enforcing immigration laws, protecting cyberspace, and helping the country bounce back from disasters. Let's make this tangible. For most of us, the most visible part of DHS is the TSA, right? Every single time you fly, you are interacting with that first mission, preventing terrorism. That's them, screening every single passenger and every single bag.
And then there's FEMA. When a hurricane or a tornado or a wildfire strikes, FEMA is the part of DHS that coordinates that massive federal response to help communities get back on their feet. This directly connects to that fifth mission, ensuring the nation is resilient.
But to really wrap your head around this whole operation today, you have to look at the sheer scale of it. It's just huge. So let's do that. Let's break down DHS by the numbers. Remember that initial workforce of 180,000 people? Well, today, the department has grown a lot. We're now talking about more than 230,000 dedicated men and women working to keep the country safe.
And that huge number of employees makes DHS the third largest cabinet department in the entire federal government. It's right behind the much older departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs. It's a true giant.
You know the old saying, follow the money? Well, it's a great way to see an organization's real priorities. And this budget breakdown tells a really clear story. FEMA and Customs and Border Protection get the two biggest slices of the pie, which tells you that disaster response and border security are two of the most resource-intensive parts of their entire mission. So, we've seen how DHS was forged in the fire of 9/11 to meet the threats of that era. But the world never stops changing, which leaves us with this final big question to think about. What new challenges, things like cyber warfare, climate change, and all kinds of new global threats, are going to define the Department of Homeland Security for the next 20 years?